Every once in a while, we just get lucky. For me, it was the case when I asked Marven for their RS 1.2, 2.5 to 15 by 44 first focal plane rifle scope. I figured, let me find another rifle scope to compare it against. Enter the Tract Toric 2.5 to 15 by 44. This is not my first Tract. In fact, this is my fourth. I've reviewed two 4 to 20s and a 4.5 to 30, all of which I felt could have been improved optically. Physically, they all felt really good. They look really good, and all the controls are excellent. They're also made in Japan and priced very aggressively for the market, considering that you can buy them directly through Tract, so thus there's no middleman price increase, which is really, really sweet. They also offer a pretty substantial first responder / LEO / military discount, so you can get these things for even cheaper than what you could normally find them for. All of that added up, I wanted to give Tract one more shot, one more chance to see if they have a scope out there that I can really say I love and enjoy. So when I found this for sale for a very good price, I jumped at the opportunity to compare it head to head against the Marven, as well as see if Tract can actually produce a very good optic. I've already gone fairly in depth with other Tract unboxings, so if you want to see more of what comes inside the box, go check out those videos. I bought this used. It came with the MDT branded rings, which are fantastic. It did not come with the MK machining throw lever though, but I did lend this out to somebody, and unfortunately they lost one of the clamps, so they got me a throw lever to say I'm sorry, which is fine because I called up MDT and they are sending me a new clamp. Anyway, onto the scope. These are made in Japan and they have a lovely, lovely gray coloration. I really love how these things look. With the accessories still mounted on the optic, we come in at 33.5 ounces. Tract claims 29.8 naked, so really not too bad. To compare it against, I have an Athlon Helios BTR Gen 2 4 to 20 in an ADM Scout mount, which comes in just a touch heavier at 34.5 ounces. But comparing apples to apples, we have the Marven RS 1.2 with the AED mount caps, which comes in at 28.2 ounces, which is a little bit heavier than their acclaimed 26.5 naked. So the Marven is about 3 ounces lighter than the Tract, but the Tract has a couple more features going on. Starting off with the back, we have the fast focus eyepiece, which is completely rock solid. Very hard to turn and has a nice gripped outside texture, so if you do have to make an adjustment, at least you have that. Magnification ring is a standard 180-degree throw, and it is extremely buttery smooth. The throw lever is absolutely required, though, because that little thumb ramp tab really just isn't doing much as far as making it easy to turn. Now, I did buy this used, and unfortunately, I didn't realize it was a non-illuminated version. Tract does offer this scope illuminated and non-illuminated, MOA, and in mils, first and second focal plane, capped and uncapped turrets, basically every sort of configuration you could ask for. As far as our side parallax, it's a 270-degree throw, most of which is taken up from its minimum of 10 yards to 100 yards, and the last quarter turn goes from 100 out to infinity. The feel on this, again, is exceptional. Very smooth, very nicely damped, and I like the splines on the outside. It gives just enough texture without being too aggressive. Superb. This model is considered their long-range hunting, and as a result of that, they have a capped windage, which I absolutely love. It is very clearly labeled, and you can see everything from behind this thing if you had to make an adjustment with it. And if you did have to make an adjustment with it, you'd be very pleased because the feel and sound on these turrets is quite excellent, especially for the $1,000 price point. However, I must still find nitpicks everywhere. And for this, it's going to be the lock. The lock mechanism on all of the Tract Torics that I've experienced is very easy to engage and disengage. And I've had the unfortunate, I'll say, situation where I'm making a quick adjustment and I'll accidentally put a little bit too much pressure down and it'll engage the lock. I've heard rumors that some PRS shooters that use these optics will actually remove the machined splines inside the cap, so this way it doesn't lock. Another thing to take into consideration with this elevation turret is just how big it is. So if you plan on running an offset red dot at the 12 o'clock position, you're going to have to figure out an alternative means of offset red dotness because 12 o'clock is just not going to cut it. It is way too big of a turret to clear, unless you're running a giant spacer, which I don't think anyone wants to run. With that, let's take a look through this thing. Before we do that, though, let me lay out the groundwork for my previous Tract testing. What you're looking at right now is the 4 to 20. I'm going to showcase this, and then the 4.5 to 30, and why I wasn't the biggest fan of them. Both 4 to 20s, one was lent into me by one person and the second from another. Both of them were in like new condition, and I always felt that the image was just a little bit on the soft side, a little bit muddy. I couldn't really get it to be at the level that I was expecting it to be. Considering that all of these Torics have shot Ultra HD glass, I was expecting a little bit more, especially from a scope in the 5x multiplier range like the 4 to 20. The 4.5 to 30 is a little bit higher of a magnification range, and as a result of that, I'm willing to accept a little bit of a performance loss, like ever so slight. But even so, with the 34mm tube, 56mm front objective, I was expecting that optic to perform better than this, and it just wasn't the case. Now, roll in the 2.5 to 15 by 44. It's got the smallest front objective of all, a 30mm tube, and it's also smack dab in the middle of the multipliers. The 4 to 20 is a 5x, the 2.5 to 15 is a 6x, and the 4.5 to 30 is a 6.6x if you were to divide the two numbers together. So this 2.5 should be right in the middle of these two. But as you're soon about to see, that's not going to be the case. Now, as far as the two reticle options for the first focal plane setup, I'm not going to bother with the second focal plane, but it does have a duplex that is illuminated, which is pretty nice looking. But as far as what we have here, you are looking at the illuminated first focal plane MRAD hunting reticle. That is the name for this reticle. They also offer an Eagleman reticle, which I think is a little bit too busy. This reticle clearly is a very simple milling reticle with fairly nicely defined hash marks. I like everything about this reticle. It's very simple, yet very effective and very easy to read. If we contrast that with what the Eagleman reticle is, I think this is just a little bit too busy, a little bit too fine. If it was a little bit coarser gradients, similar to what we're seeing with the illuminated first focal plane MRAD hunting reticle, then I think I would like it a little bit more. However, I'm a big fan of simplicity in most cases, and when it comes to a very usable style reticle, this thing that you're looking at right now is superb. Now, because this is not an illuminated version, I unfortunately cannot test the illumination. That's simple. But I have been very satisfied with Tract's other illuminated scopes, so if you do buy this with illumination, I'm sure you'd be very satisfied. The sound and feel of these turrets is exceptional. I just wish the lock was a little bit more positive. I might try putting a larger O-ring in there, see if that makes a difference, but I'm not too sure if that's going to work. If you want to check out the Eagleman scope, however, which is the exact same scope minus the reticle, this also offers a different elevation turret with larger numbers in between. I kind of like it. It's got to be really easy to read. Another nice thing that Tract offers is a ton of accessories. So if you want to change or modify any of these scopes, they have everything available right on their website. Very, very cool. Physically, the scope is exceptional. Given the $1,000 price point, which, by the way, as of right now, May 15th, I don't know when this video is going to be dropping, but As of right now, this exact scope, non-illuminated, is in the clearance section on their website for $775, which is a really good price. $1,000 for the illuminated version would be an amazing price still, but you're saving 220-ish bucks as long as you're okay not having illumination. It's a no-brainer. I know I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but if you're really interested, go check it out while they're still available. The reticle on this is perfect, perfectly scaled. At the minimum magnification here across dead bush, it is perfectly fine to pick up and use without any form of illumination. Now, granted, if it was much darker out, I would much rather have illumination, only because you'll be able to see the reticle that much easier. But if you don't have illumination, or you're using it in an environment like this, it's, I feel, as small as you can, as fine as you can go without being too fine. And when you're at the maximum magnification here at 81 yards, the reticle is also, again, perfectly scaled. It's fine enough that you could use all those little hash marks effectively, but not so fine that you can't see it, but not so coarse that it's going to be obscuring your target. I really do feel that Tract walked this very narrow line with setting up the proportions on this reticle, and I am very, very satisfied with that. As far as our image quality, there's not much we could really say negatively against this. When I did do my filming for this, it was much colder outside. You can clearly see there's snow, and my house is unfortunately heated. Well, no, it's a benefit that it's heated, but unfortunately it's going to be creating some air turbulence, so you're going to be seeing some very aggressive mirage going on. We will be testing this thing's capacity out at extended range soon, but for right now, if you could look through the mirage, optically this thing looks very good. There's zero chromatic aberration to speak of, and the colors look extremely representative of what we actually see with the naked eye. Very, very impressive. I should also note that when I was focusing on my target earlier, I set the side parallax to an indicated 80-ish yards, and it was basically perfect. This is technically touted as a hunting optic. Now, yes, I would recommend anyone get a scope that has illumination for varying reasons, but most notably, it's just to be able to see the reticle in lower light environments on darker targets, or even brighter environments. It really makes a huge difference. But if you don't have illumination, is this scope still going to be usable? And what kind of light transmission are we going to see? Well, to my eye, there is no real loss of brightness. Now, to the naked eye, it's going to be a little different because as the outside ambient light darkens, our iris is going to dilate, and as a result, it might be larger than the exit pupil on this scope, or any scope for that matter. Speaking of exit pupil, at the minimum magnification, it's 11.4 millimeter, which is pretty big, and at the maximum, it's 2.9, which is, I would say, pretty good, more or less average. So this is going to perform at least as good as most other optics in the magnification range, roughly. A lot of 3 to 18s that I've tested, some lower 2 to 12s, 2.5 to 10s, things like that. Those will be a little bit better only because the maximum magnification is a little bit lower. Ultimately, though, I haven't noticed any real loss of brightness through this thing, whether on camera or to my eye. I'm very happy to see that, considering this is touted to be a hunting optic. Alrighty, let's push this thing to its limits. It is a very bright early morning day, really, really cold. I think it was around 10 degrees when I filmed this and quite windy, so I was not happy. But I do it for you folks. I'm out there for all of you. The reticle out here is just good enough. Illumination would help, but again, it's so bright out there, I don't even know if you'd notice the illumination. I want to say a definitive answer, but I don't think it's really going to help all that much. Regardless, this reticle is still really well scaled. The coatings on the rear eyepiece lenses, though, are doing a really good job of not having that sun that's right on my back distort or destroy our image and capacity to look through this thing. So, good job, Tract, for using the Shot Ultra HD glass because it is well coated. Focusing our attention on our first solar panel around the 360 yard mark, setting the side parallax roughly to where we need to be, increasing the magnification to its maximum yields a very accurate looking image. There's the ever so slightest touch of chromatic aberration on the 12 o'clock position of that solar panel, but that is really it. Once you dial in the side parallax, this thing looks exceptionally nice. Good colors, good contrast. Nothing to complain about. You can even see all of the small horizontal lines on those solar cells. Really cool. From there, we're going to push our focus to the 1,000-yard solar panel. We're at roughly 10x right here, and you can see how aggressive the wind is because I have a backpack as ballast on my tripod, and it's rocking back and forth. I try my best to limit that, folks, but it's really rough. Again, the tiniest touch of chromatic aberration on the 12 o'clock position of that solar panel, and a ton of mirage because as cold as the air is, the sun is still quite warm, and thus you get turbulation. Turbulation? What the fuck is turbulence? Turbulence. Jesus Christ. I'm going to leave that in because I think it's funny. Anyway, when the sun hits the rear lens, you can see we have a little bit of flaring at 6 o'clock, but other than that, it's really not that bad. Let's now add 10 mils of elevation and reacquire our target. With 10 mils of added elevation and the camera height tweaked like a 32nd of an inch, you can see we have a beautiful looking image, the exact same as when we had 0 mils of added elevation. And to prove it, setting it back to 0 and reacquiring our 0 shows basically the exact same image. This is great news for anybody that wants to actually use this scope and the turrets to dial for your elevation. Oh, look at the birds that just landed at the 1,000-yard power tower. I didn't even notice that. About 5 mils up. Neat. All the way out at the horizon, roughly 2,000 yards. With the mirage that we see in the air, it's going to be a little bit challenging to see anything clearly at that distance, but I'm going to give it a whirl anyway. This is set at infinity, and I reckon if the air was calm, we'd have a much better view down there, but this is as good as it's going to get, unfortunately. Now, the mirage is going to wreak a little bit of havoc for us, testing out the image stability as I shift the camera side to side at 15x. The reticle stays absolutely perfect, but the image downrange does not look any worse. Granted, I know it doesn't look amazing to begin with just because of how chaotic the air is, but it doesn't get worse, which is a positive. At 10x, we have a very similar sort of performance, but a much larger eyebox. Again, going from that 2.9 millimeter exit pupil down to 11.4, it's going to gradually get better. And the fact that as we go into the middle magnifications here around 7x or so, it doesn't continue to get worse is pretty friggin' awesome. It's actually very, very good to see. I'm very happy because image stability has been the #1 thing that has thrown me off for a lot of optics. A lot of people were ripping on me for my March FX 1.5 to 15 dual focal plane review. If you were to check out that scope's performance in this segment, you'll clearly see that it is much nicer to get behind the Tract than the March. Showcasing this scope's Eyebox in a more dynamic role at 2.5x, it is massive, very easy to get behind, and if you're not perfectly squared up behind it, it doesn't really matter because the image is still wonderfully sharp, and I had no noticeable parallax shift, which is excellent. As I increase the magnification, you will see that it's still going to perform well within the aspects of that given magnification, meaning it is at least average, and average is pretty good, but I'd reckon it's still slightly above average in most cases, again just because of how stable the reticle and the image look to one another. If you really focus on my eye chart down there, everything stays very clear, no matter what the position or what the magnification. Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. At 15x, you can see it's a little bit challenging to get it just right, but once we're there, we can keep it there. And again, this is just with my camera freehand behind this thing. It's not like I have a good solid cheek rest, which you should have on your firearm, and if you do, you will never have a hard time getting behind this thing at 15x. All right, let's get right into the side-by-side comparisons between the Toric and the RS. Both of these scopes have the exact same magnification, same tube size, same front objective size, basically the same length. Actually, they're exactly the same length. Both of them are offered in first focal plane as seen here. We already talked about the weight. The Tract is a little bit heavier at 29.8 versus 26.5 ounces, so that might make or break a lot of people's decisions. As far as our overall field of view, guess what? They're identical, 41.7 to 7. And as far as our exit pupil, guess what? They're exactly the same, 11.4 to 2.9. And as far as the eye relief, guess what? They're exactly the same. It almost makes me wonder if both of these are made in the same facility in Japan. But you didn't hear that from me. The Maven is $200 more expensive than the Tract. The Maven does come with some pretty nice reticle options, I have to say. I much prefer the RS reticle for fast style, hunting style shooting, whereas the Tract is a little bit more of a tactical / hybrid reticle setup, whether it's this no-name reticle or the Eagleman reticle. I would give the RS the better overall cohesive reticle options for the magnification and the point style use for these scopes, which, I mean, Tract on themselves lists the scope as a hunting scope first and foremost. Can both of these fill the hybrid role of tactical and hunting? Absolutely. The Tract is a little bit heavier, but it definitely has a little bit more tactile of an approach. The Maven is much more set up for hunting, even though the elevation turret is non-locking, and I did get a little bit of flack from even Maven themselves saying, you said that the elevation turret was too loose, too easy to turn. I'm like, I do feel that way. I feel the detents are not as sharp or as positive as they should be. Yes, it's got a zero stop, but it just doesn't fill me full of confidence, especially if something is going to be in the field a lot. I'd much prefer a lock or a very hard to turn turret. I'm sure many people would agree, but Maven did say that they spec'd out their RS 1.2 from feedback from their customers, so who am I to judge for them trying to make good for their customers? I have nothing but admiration for that, and I really do appreciate Maven for doing so. However, optically, even though these were filmed on the exact same day, there's a little bit more brightness to the air. Jesus Christ, I'm doing it again. There's a little bit more brightness to the image on the RS only because the sun had come out a little bit more. Both of these are capable of producing pretty good looking images, but I have to give the edge to the Toric. It just has a little bit more polish to it, a little bit more depth. You could see what I'm talking about as far as ambient light, where you could see clearly shadows coming from the trees when I filmed with the RS, versus for the Toric, there are no shadows. So is this a perfect apples to apples comparison? No, the lighting is a little bit different, but that should give the edge to the Maven because it was filmed on a brighter day. The Toric wasn't, but yet the Toric still has a little bit better contrast. It still has a little bit sharper of an image. It's got the little bit extra that I feel really adds up to make a better overall cohesive package, especially if you're going to be using this for a hybrid role. If you're using it, something's falling down behind me. If you're using this for a hybrid role or more of a hunting role, the RS might be a little bit better. If you're doing a hybrid / tactical role, I think the Tract would be a better option. And it would also be at least $200 cheaper. The only other optic that I had that was the same magnification as both the RS and the Toric is the Night Pearl Manual. This is, again, a 2.5 to 15 optic, but this one features a 50 millimeter front objective. It is in the second focal plane. It's about $250 cheaper. The same length, about 3 ounces lighter than the Toric, about the same field of view, about the same exit pupil. In fact, it's a touch larger, they claim, at maximum magnification, 3.3 millimeter to 2.9 millimeter, but the exact same eye relief. The view through the Night Pearl is a little bit smaller. We have a lot more of the scope body shown, but the Night Pearl is another good option if you're more favoring the hunting side of things. 26 ounces, it might be a little bit heavier than what most people would like. I really like the reticle options for the Night Pearl, and if you are focusing more on your hunting side of things, I think the Night Pearl reticle would be a better overall suit for that role. The illumination on the Night Pearl was disappointing to say the least. I know for a fact the Tract Toric would have better illumination. It would be the entire reticle, whereas with the Night Pearl, it's just the center dot, but it never gets bright enough to really be usable. Both of these are capable of producing a very similar looking image, but the Night Pearl does exhibit a lot more chromatic aberration. You can see it, what I'm talking about, in the 6 o'clock position on the 100-yard backer on that target, and it's a bit distracting at times. However, I do know that a lot of European scopes are designed in such a way where there is a little bit more chromatic aberration, so this way you can get better contrast on certain targets in a hunting role. How true is this? I can't really say for sure. Do I understand that concept? I do. The logic behind it does make sense, but it's still not something that I particularly care for. I'd much rather have as true to life image as possible, and the Tract Toric represents that flawlessly. The Night Pearl actually has a very vivid color to the image and all of its colors, but I think it's a little bit too much, especially with how much chromatic aberration creeps up. Not my personal cup of tea, but it might be for you. And if it is, then wonderful. I think the Night Pearl is a wonderfully optioned out scope. I really like how well built it feels. I like all the controls. I like the materials. It is Chinese versus Japanese, but it is $250 less expensive. But is that enough to sway me one way or the other? If you're going for more of a hunting role, the Night Pearl, yeah, it's I think a good option. It's got capped controls. It's really, really nicely made. But I think I'd still prefer the Tract Toric because the illumination would be better if you did opt for the illumination. It does have a more rich feature set. So if you did plan on taking it possibly to do more long-range shooting as opposed to just hunting, the Toric will absolutely be able to fill that void a little bit better than the Night Pearl. But the Night Pearl is still a pretty good option. I think it's got very clear looking image. Here at 15x at 300 yards, you can see for yourself. They're not exactly the same scope side by side, but I mean, they're the same magnification, so why not roll them in together? How could I compare something in the MPVO segment without talking about the Meopta Optica 6 3-18 by 50? This has long since been my benchmark optic for this magnification range since I first bought it many years ago, and for very, very good reason. First and foremost, when they were readily available, they were fairly affordable, $700 to $800-ish. Length on it is a little bit longer than the Tract by only a half an inch. It's the exact same weight, offers very similar field of view in retrospect to the magnification difference, but it does have a smaller exit pupil, 9.5 to 2.8 millimeter. But again, we do have a magnification difference. But both of them have the exact same eye relief of 3.9 inches. View through both of these are very similar. I did have to crop the Meopta video a touch more, so they're basically about the same. They also show just about the same amount of scope body. The Optica 6 does have a smaller view through it than most. However, it's on par with this Tract. The Tract is also on par with the Night Pearl, and it was also on par with the Marven previously. So all four of these scopes have shown to be fairly consistent as far as the view looking through it. The smaller the view looking through it, typically the higher the resolution image. I like to use the analogy, go download a JPEG online that's small resolution and try to print it out on a big sheet of paper or on a poster board. You're going to notice all of the imperfections to the image, and I feel the same way about rifle scopes like this. The smaller the view looking through it, typically the higher the resolution, and both of these are proof positive of that. However, there are some scopes that buck that trend where you can have a giant view looking through and massive amounts of resolution, sharpness, clarity, colors, everything. I'm talking about Gen 3 Razor HD 6-36 as just a reference point. You're exceptionally wild. But both of these scopes right now represent average, maybe slightly below average as far as view looking through it. But resolution, sharpness, clarity-wise, I'd say they're both on the very good to excellent end of the spectrum, which is pretty high praise. Both of these at 200 yards are producing very good-looking images. We do notice the 3x difference for the Optica. Obviously, the view of that target is a little bit larger, but is it enough to segue you one way versus the other? Only you can truly answer that question. The same can be said at the minimum magnification, 2.5 to 3x. Is it enough of a difference to segue you one way versus the other? Again, I really don't think so. The MRAD1 reticle found in this version of the Optica 6 is still my favorite reticle of the bunch, as far as using at the minimum and the maximum magnification. However, I must say I'm a big fan of a very simple milling reticle that's found on the Toric. And I mean, you can't get much better than what the Toric has set up. It's exceptionally good. But so is the Optica. There is one big difference between these two: availability. The Meopta has been basically out of stock everywhere. If you could find one used for a decent price, and decent would be sub $700, I would say jump on it. But if you want to buy something brand new, the Tract Toric is, well, king of this hill. Or is it? Enter the Vector Continental 2 to 12 by 44. This rifle scope comes in at just about half the price of the Tract, around $600. Yes, you could use my coupon code to save 10%, so if you're interested in that, go check out the Continental full review. But nevertheless, it's a Chinese-made optic versus the Tract, which is a Japanese-made optic. But it's still 60% the cost of the Tract. And it doesn't perform 60% the capacity of the Tract. In fact, far from it. Despite the fact that there is a 3x difference between these two, do these targets look like there's a 3x difference at 100 yards? Not really, because the view through the Continental is giant by comparison. We also see a little bit less scope body, but that's neither here nor there. If you're not a fan of, I believe it's the 5.7 reticle that we're looking at right now through the Continental, you can get the 6.9 reticle, which is basically like a segmented EOTech reticle, but it's only really noticeably different below 6x. Above 6x, they're the exact same reticle, which I think is a great choice because the reticle is exceptionally good if you're planning on using it for holdovers or for speed. Honestly, they're both really good, but the Continental it still manages to be really simple and elegant while providing a lot more information with that Christmas tree style reticle. Not to suck that thing's D too much though, let's continue on with the stats. If you're looking for a slightly shorter scope, the Continental's 12.4 to 14 inches. As far as the weight, the Continental is 2 ounces lighter. Keep in mind it's also a 34mm tube, not the 30mm tube found on the Tract. Field of view is going to be different because they are different magnifications. But if you're curious, the Vector comes in at 54 to 10.8 and the Tract 41.7 to 7. I do not have an exit pupil stat for the Continental, but I can assure you it is going to be a little bit larger than what the Tract is capable of providing. And as far as the eye relief, they're both the same at 3.9 inches, yet the view through the Continental is as large as it is. Which scope is best for whom? If you value Japanese quality and Japanese precision, then the Tract is a really hard scope to overlook. But if you're on a bit more of a budget and you want a little bit more information to the reticle, and you like having a larger view through it, and you still want to do that hybrid role of tactical-ish, hunting-ish, you can't overlook the Vector Continental. It's too good of an optic to overlook. Look at these two here at 300 yards at maximum magnification, 15 and 12x respectively. Yes, there is a magnification difference now. It's a little bit more noticeable, but really it doesn't seem like that much. If you had this on a blind test side to side, you'd probably reckon that they're closer than a 3x delta. Which one is better for whom? Budget-wise. If you can't spend $1,000, buy the Continental. If you can, maybe buy the Tract. But either which way, you're going to be getting a hell of an optic no matter which one you buy. If you couldn't guess by all of the wonderful things I've said about the scope, I adore this thing. I really like everything it has to offer, with the exception of the elevation lock being as easy to overcome as it is. Reticle wise, I really dig this. It's so simple yet so effective at being, well, simple and easy to use, but yet still have enough information that you could still use it for holdovers at distance. Still fine enough that you can use it at the maximum magnification, but coarse enough that you could still use it at the minimum magnification with ease, even on a slightly complicated target set. Is there really much else to talk about? Well, if you don't like this particular optic, you can get a couple of different ones that we've already looked at. But with the exception of the Vector Continental, I would choose this over the other options. It feels a little bit better. It's a little bit cheaper, or at least I should say it's priced very accordingly for what it is. The fact that it's Japanese made and comes in $200 less expensive than the Maven, and I feel offers a better feature set than the Maven, is proof enough. But if you don't like what this thing offers, Tract offers a ton of different accessories that you can option out on this thing. And I really appreciate that, because if you don't need any of the accessories that most often comes in some rifle scopes, you don't get that many with the Tract, but you're also not spending the money on them to keep them in your box or put them on a shelf and have them collect dust. So the fact that not only Tract offers direct-to-consumer sales just like Maven does, but also doesn't bombard you with accessories that you might not need is pretty nice. Now, for many of you, you will say, well, I'd rather spend $1,100 or $1,200 and have everything possible come in the box. It's just the way it is. Tract wanted to offer a bare bones optic and give it to you as affordable of a price as possible. And I much rather prefer that than, again, the alternative. I really wish I had bought the illuminated version because I would like this scope that much more. But honestly, I don't think I really would necessarily need illumination for this scope. I have an idea of what rifle I'm going to throw this optic on, and it's going to be a multi-way comparison when I do finally get the time to put this up against several other scopes for this rifle. And I'll make a video series on it because I think it'll be interesting. I think it'll be a good talking point for a lot of people for a lot of reasons. But before I segue any further from the topic at hand, this is a wonderful rifle scope for many reasons. The fact that it's just available is enough for most people, myself included. But to get a Japanese-made scope that genuinely uses shot Ultra HD glass in a fairly good size and weighted package. It's not the lightest, but it's not the heaviest nor the biggest. It's right in the middle of the road. And sometimes right in the middle of the road is where you need to be. You don't need to necessarily be all the way off to the shoulder because, yeah, you might get a better line to go faster through the corner, but you might hit a pothole, you might hit a rock, or you might wipe out and just hit somebody else. So sometimes middle of the road might be a little bit more boring, but it might be the safer bet. And it's not necessarily how you go into the corner, but it's how you come out. And for that, this Tract Toric comes out of the corner really, really well planted. With all that being said, a huge thank you for all of you for staying tuned and watching this. No, Tract did not offer the scope for me. I bought it with my own hard-earned money, which I got from many of you at home. So truly, thank you very much. And as always, I'll see you again next time. And a huge thank you to my Patreon providers and my Subscribe subscribers. Without you, this truly wouldn't be possible. If you'd like to support my channel but don't want to join either of those, I completely understand. But you could still help by using my affiliate links in the description below and or like, share, and subscribe as always. Again, thank you very much.